Good evening and welcome all of you to the Georgia Museum of Art. I'll tell you a story to begin because so many of these images which you're going to see are of Georgia of the South. Someone asked me one time, what is the Center for the Study of Southern Culture at the University of Mississippi in Oxford? And then at Chapel Hill, there's another Center for the Study of the South. And I said, well, we like to study ourselves in the South. And this is a guy from New York, and he said, we don't have a Center for the Study of New Jersey culture. And I thought, no, I don't think you do. In the critical vocabulary, assessing or describing Southern art, Southern literature, and Southern culture, the notion of a sense of place has become a pervasive and abiding cliche. One, in spite of its staleness, not without merit. In the exhibition we're going to hear about tonight, In Time We Shall Know Ourselves, upstairs in this museum's Kennedy Gallery, such places as Culpeper, Virginia, Louisville, Kentucky, and Southington, Connecticut are such sites. But they are much, much more, as glimpsed through the lens of our guest tonight. For he's made of these locales outdoor laboratories, if you will, for studies of Americans in 1974 and the places they frequented, the places that formed and nurtured them. It's people who really matter in these photographs, these men and women, boys and girls, white people and black people, who betray in stance and demeanor their yearning, their pleasure, and their fatigue and pride. Those traits and so many others that we as viewers are privileged to take away from what are actually images of everyday life. The true connection, the true demarcation line, to be more precise, between vernacular and fine art photography. For example, have a close look at new picture books where two toddlers or post-toddlers hold out for us their new books, The Happy Rabbit and The Guardian Mother. These two boys, one with a charming smile and the other with an incipient scowl, clutch their treasures with the same sense of promise, innocence, and anticipation we receive from the image itself. And as we move on in the gallery to the next picture of small-town American life, we remember those two boys in their sturdy shoes as emblematic of the dignity of all of this artist's people. Raymond Smith never condescends or patronizes his subjects. His gaze is as affectionate as it is candid, as suggestive as it is real, as local as it is universal. These photographs allow us to construct our own stories, resurrect our own memories of tales from the me decade, where hedonism, exhibitionism, and voyeurism, I miss it, those terms associated with the art of the period seem oh so suspect as characteristics of these folks, of Raymond Smith's people, of these places, of this artist. Raymond Smith was born in Newark, New Jersey. In 1942, he received his BA in American Studies from Stetson University in DeLand, Florida, and was awarded a Woodrow Wilson Foundation Fellowship to attend Yale University, where he received his MA and Master of Philosophy degrees, also in American Studies. Smith's photographs have appeared in the Chicago Review, New America, University of New Mexico, the Yale Photographic Review, Southern Cultures from the University of North Carolina. His writings on art, photography, and American literature have appeared in the American Art Review, Art Documentation, Art New England, the Yale Photographic Review, and Studies in the Literary Imagination from the Georgia State University. As R.W. Smith bookseller in New Haven, Connecticut, he has specialized since 1975 in rare and out-of-print books on art, architecture, design, and photography. I was told I could leave out the next information, but I'm going to include it emphatically, since this museum has been a recipient several times of awards from the Art Library Society of North America, of which Raymond has been a member since 1980. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Raymond Smith.
Thank you, Bill. Can you turn off some of these lights? All right. Oh, thank you, Bill. It was very touching. I appreciate very much that beautiful introduction. And before I begin, I want to make some acknowledgments. First of all, I want to thank Ronald Thomas, who's on the Faculty of Architecture here at the university, for making the initial investigations to enable me to make contact with Bill and with the university and the museum here about making a proposal for my show to travel here. Ron is here in the audience, and he's a wonderful collector himself and a historian of urban planning and architecture. Of course, I want to thank Bill Island for making that possibility of meeting with him and his staff on such short notice 2 years ago. I was traveling through the South. I was looking for other museums that might possibly like to take the exhibition after it finished in Montgomery. And he, on short notice, assembled a group of probably 15 or 20 curatorial staff and others to listen to my proposal and to see some of the photographs that I brought with me. Annalise Mundy, the deputy director of the museum, has curated the show, and I think she's done a stunning installation of the work. I'm very proud of what she's done. It's an honor, really, to be here at the university and at the museum to have my work presented in such beautiful surroundings. And I'm grateful to her and also to those who assisted her in the installation, and that includes Elizabeth Howe, assistant preparator, who executed Annalise's design, Lynn Boland and his wife Kathy, who selected the font for the signage and designed the layout for the signage that you see in the exhibition. Also want to thank Robert Russell for his stunning lighting design. And then last of all, I'd like to thank Joe Gerhardt, a friend of mine and a neighbor in New Haven, who's driven all the way down for this and is here tonight. And he prepared the PowerPoint, which you'll see here today. And although I've given talks at the 3 previous venues of my exhibition, each one has been different. This is the first one where we've had a PowerPoint, so it's really special to be able to see what I'm talking about. I'm focusing my talk on this particular image, and then I'm going to go out from there, backward and forward in time. Because I think, first of all, this was taken in Georgia, and I thought it was appropriate for me to talk about an image that stemmed from my travels in Georgia. And if you've seen the book is available in the museum shop, and I think there'll be a signing later. But anyway, more pictures in the book are from the state of Georgia than any other state. So it was important for me to get a show in Georgia, and this is one of the greatest museums in the entire South. So I'm very, very honored to have this show here, and I'm honored to have all of you people here to hear what I have to say. So here we go. Where does one be? Oh, the title of this talk is Report from Infinity, Rural Highway, Southern Georgia, After Rainstorm. That's the title of this photograph. Where does one begin when organizing a selection of photographs taken 4 decades ago into a meaningful statement? In an attempt to make sense of what I was experiencing that summer, I have organized these images into a scheme less attentive to chronology and more concerned with creating a meaningful framework with which to view them. The sequence, which begins with a photograph of a school security guard in Jacksonville, Florida, taken towards the end of my travels, concludes with an earlier photograph of passengers on the James River Ferry in Virginia. The structure of the exhibition and of my book and the sequencing is basically poetic, with attention to alternating rhythms, voices loud and soft, moods high and low, recurring images and codas, and movement. The security guard, with his eye contact, invites the viewer into the sequence to partake in this journey. In the James River Ferry, with the ship's passengers looking toward land, we are no longer confronted with subjects face to face. As Richard King comments in his essay on my work, quote, "Those tourists standing at the stern of the boat are looking away in all sorts of directions except at the photographer or at us. The trip is over." Neither chronological nor geographical, the journey has been reshaped to suggest certain concerns which had become paramount with me during my extended travels, mostly over a 3-month period in the summer of 1974. The photograph on which I've based this talk, Rural Highway, Southern Georgia, after Rainstorm, the second in my sequence, may also be considered an alternate beginning. Just as the self-portrait, the image immediately preceding James River Ferry, and I'll show you that later, might be considered an alternate ending. It pictures the second-hand Volkswagen which took us along on our travels until it ultimately broke down in Kansas City several weeks later. The car is on the side of the road, its passenger side door open, through which a sign is faintly visible through its open window. The storm clouds in the distance indicate where we had been. Half of the photograph pictures the car, the other half the road. The facts are these. The windshield wipers stopped working, and we were forced to pull to the side of the road until the storm subsided. The passenger side door was opened simply to air the car out. And during that pause, I decided to take the car's portrait. It was as much an actor in our roadside drama as the people I had been photographing up until then. Alexander Nemerov, while composing his essay on the photographs for my book, wrote me to inquire about the sign seen through the passenger side window, which intrigued him, since the words were barely visible in the photocopy I sent him. Nor had I noticed them when I took the photograph. The sign read, "Christ is the answer." But signs are not inherently visual, so I usually kept them out of my photographs, believing that visual language and written language were separate spheres. In Rural Highway, Nemerov later wrote, "The photographer finds divinity in the place he happens to stop." He knew, of course, that I had not noticed the sign until after I printed the picture. Nevertheless, it is this sense of the Spirit, not the letter of the Spirit, that I think Nemerov was getting at in his interpretation. The photograph represents a moment of pause a time to take stock of where we had been and how far we intended to go. We were basically directionless as regards to the specifics of geography, only that we knew we wanted to visit New Orleans and eventually California. Why we decided to drive up into southern Georgia from Tallahassee and later farther north into Montgomery instead of heading directly west through the Florida Panhandle to Mobile is still a mystery to me. Had we done so, we would not have this picture. Our travels were improvisational, directionless perhaps, but not without direction in another sense of the word. For me, the photograph resonates on various levels. The Puritans found symbolism in every aspect of daily life. Their literary descendants, those great writers of the American Renaissance of the mid-19th century, Hawthorne, Melville, and Thoreau, scrapped the divinity, but kept the symbolism for their masterpieces. The scarlet letter A, forced upon Hester Prynne, so that all the world would know of her sin. Melville's assertion that visible objects are but as pasteboard masks. Thoreau's acute observations of nature's intricacies, the structure of a leaf, the movements of insects, the cries of birds, during his time alone on Walden Pond, suggesting something larger than the minutiae of fact. Like these writers I so much admired, I sensed the power of symbols and sought import beyond the seeming ordinariness of my subjects. That particular day was bounded by two photographs, one taken in northern Florida in the morning of two young brothers, and this one's not available, and the other, the other one in eastern Alabama. This is it, on the road to Montgomery. These two portraits bracketing that day's drama pictured African Americans and, like the car, along the side of the road. Though the subjects are obviously poor, I was not out to propound any political motive. I strove at the time for a democratic sweep in my portraits and an apolitical stance. Walker Evans, in his and James Agee's Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, their classic Depression documentary on three white tenant farmer families in Alabama, photographed the very poor. Evans took few portraits in his long career, but those portraits for Let Us Now Praise Famous Men transcend. Offering a view of America as it is, not as it should or might be, Evans had no illusions that his photographs would change society. Nevertheless, his photographs from the 1930s provide a faithful record of what America looked like during the depths of the Depression. Evans's faithfulness to fact, unencumbered by ideology, offered a model, guiding me as I set out on my own individual odyssey. The drama of finally getting the wipers replaced is recorded in the portraits of the white garage proprietor, there he is, and the two auto mechanics I took that afternoon. We left that afternoon equipped with a new pair of wipers and a large watermelon the proprietor gave us from the patch across the road from his house, a classic dog trot style residence which can be seen in the background of his portrait. If we can imagine that line along the side of the road going further back in time and space, the day before, we are now in St. Petersburg, Florida, where Robert Frank photographed elderly residents on a park bench, one of the few from his classic book, The Americans, set in Florida, my home state. I was thinking of that photograph as we drove along Central Avenue in downtown St. Petersburg when I spotted a man near a street corner waiting for a bus and got out of the car to talk with him. I took an initial photograph of him full length, then listened as he began recounting his history. The moment when he pulled a small crucifix from his pocket and held it to his heart was when I took the photograph. It was what had gotten him through life, he said. If we can now imagine 2 days later, that line along the side of the road going forward in time and space, we are now in Demopolis, Alabama. Finding myself near the area chronicled in Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, I decided that the photographs taken that day would be my personal homage to my mentor, Walker Evans. It was Friday, July 26, 1974. The city was teeming with shoppers, black and white, young and old. I seemed to be photographing just about everybody I met who was willing to pause from their shopping. There were 2 men standing on a corner, each bearing a bag of popcorn. The older man impressed me with his air of dignity. He never smiled as did his younger friend, whom I had just photographed. He looked away, offering a stately profile as I snapped the shutter. The sweat of a hot summer day showing through his white shirt and the grease saturating the bag of popcorn did nothing to diminish my impression. 2 portraits, one of an older white man, the other of an older black man, taken 3 days and 606 miles apart. As Alexander Nemerov has understood, the photographer finds divinity in the place he happens to stop. Let us now turn to my own self-portrait, taken approximately a month before I set out on my more extended travels. And the facts are these. I had a seasonal job as a photographer for a New Haven firm, which produced laminated ID cards. They had sent me down to Williamsburg, Virginia, to photograph the students at William and Mary College. I had just finished photographing hundreds of students with a motorized camera whose magazine contained a 100-foot roll of 35mm film, which could take up to 800 exposures before being reloaded. My day's work was over, and I checked into the motel. I set down the suitcase on the bed, loosened my tie, and decided to take my own portrait with my much slower twin-lens camera. Like Rural Highway, the photograph resonates on various levels, and the 3 writers who have discussed it at some length each see it in a different light. Alexander Nemerov draws a comparison between Rural Highway, southern Georgia, and the self-portrait. Quote, the penultimate photograph showing Smith in a motel room in Williamsburg, Virginia, echoes Rural Highway. The photographer, on another of his road stops, now fully revealed. The resonances between the 2 photographs, such as the framed picture above the bed that repeats the Christ is the answer placard, as well as the play of the rounded lenses, Smith's glasses and cameras, the headlights and windshield of the Volkswagen, solidify the connection between them. Each portrays Smith's unsentimental and yet emotional openness to making pictures, to framing what he sees. Richard King, in his essay, Mirror with a Memory, emphasizes the symbolism of the mirror and its parallels with the camera. Quote, images of photographing and visual representations recur often throughout the sequence. Self-portrait motel room, Williamsburg, Virginia, goes behind in front of the mirror to give us the condition of possibility. Mick Gidley, in his review for the British Journal of Contemporary Photography, Source, sees the self-portrait in yet another way. Quote, hinting at the interiority that was coming. In one image, Smith also photographs himself, necktie dangling behind his camera, travel gear strewn on the bed, looking into a hotel mirror with indeterminate expression. He is, like the others in his sequence, as yet quite not known. Like the image of the car along the side of the road, he is, like the image of the car along the side of the road, for me it represented another moment of pause, a time when I personally had hit a stumbling block in my studies, and it was a time to take stock, not quite sure yet where I might be going. Gidley's comment was perceptive. I had not yet set out on that extended road trip, nor had any idea it would even happen. Nor had I yet seen that other roadside sign spotted near Hattiesburg, Mississippi, not long after leaving Demopolis, whose words I did see and recorded in my diary, but did not photograph. In time, we shall know ourselves, even as also we are known, as we ourselves are known. At the beginning of her memoir, Birthday, published when she was in her late 70s, the American surrealist painter and poet Dorothea Tanning wrote, "The beginning is an impossible place, as meaningless as that dot on my drawing in a class perspective lesson, the spot in the middle of the paper where all lines, roads, streets, came together at a place called infinity. Only, supposing out of curiosity you tried to go there, you'd never make it. The spot would have gone, would have streaked ahead, and you would have to start all over again." That line along the side of the highway extends back towards the storm clouds, towards other back roads, towards the past. And it also extends forward towards the sun, towards further roads to be traversed, towards new ventures. Rural Highway, Southern Georgia, after Rainstorm, reaches out beyond its frame. The line of infinity is not always straight. Sometimes it zigzags, like our memories, which rise up from our consciousness like the scattered stills of a film. Thank you.